Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dane Sinks here at BizNow, based in Philly, and I'm so excited to welcome you to today's webinar, our National Prefab and Modular Building Summit. We're going to be exploring innovative construction methods as well as technology shaping the world of development. I want to take a second to thank Nibby Brothers General Contractors and FRAMECAD. Their support makes programs like this possible. We have a lot to discuss, so just a few housekeeping items before we get started. All attendees are on mute and without video, but please feel free to say hello in the chat as well as where you're joining from. You are welcome to submit any questions you have in the Q&A section, and time allowing, we'll try to get to as many of those as we can. If you miss any of the panel, do not worry, the replay will be emailed to you shortly. I now want to turn things over to our moderator, Curtis Edgecombe, to introduce themselves and ask the panel to do a self-intro. Thank you.
Thanks, Dane. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, the National Prefab and Modular Building Summit. Really excited to have our team here. My name is Curtis Edgecombe. I'm the Senior Vice President of FRAMECAD Americas. FRAMECAD is the world leader in steel building innovation. We deliver the most efficient end-to-end framing technologies for and the framework to simplify building steel framing buildings. And many of our customers around the world and in North America use FRAMECAD technologies and systems to design, manufacture, and build modular and prefab buildings in offsite environments. So that's a little about me. But more importantly, the panelists today, we've got four great panelists, and I'm going to pass it over to Darian. He's going to introduce himself, and we'll go from there into Andrea next. Darian.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Curtis, and thank you for BizNow for having me. My name is Darian Dunn. I'm the managing partner of Atlantica Properties. We're a full-service real estate firm based in Atlanta, Georgia. We specialize in new construction development, the acquisition of single-family and multifamily portfolios, and also property management. We are a for-profit company, but we're mission-based, so most of our work affordable housing here in the metro Atlanta area. I run the company with my younger brother, Trent Dunn. We're both Georgia Tech graduates. We're born and raised in Atlanta. We've been landlords for over 25 years. I also spend a lot of time advocating for our industry and affordable housing in general as a board member of the Atlanta Apartment Association. So very happy to be here.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Darian. Andrea, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Andrea Osgood, Chief of Real Estate Development for Eden Housing. We're a nonprofit builder, owner, operator in California, exclusively focused on affordable rental housing, and just completed our first modular development with Factory Less last year, and have another one under construction. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Andrea. Joanna, you're next.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. So happy to be here today. My name is Joanna Schwartz. I'm the CEO, founding partner of Quartz Properties Management. We are a developer and a vertically integrated builder of residential communities that are all modular. We started the company with the premise that modular should and could be a more scalable solution to attack the attainable housing crisis in the country. And after 6.5 years, we are finally starting to prove that true. So happy to be here to talk about it.
Right. And last but not least, Randall. You're on mute, Randall, if you...
How about now? All right. Good morning, everybody. Randall Thompson, Senior Pre-Construction Manager with Nibby Brothers, with over 70 years experience. We're a general contractor located in San Francisco, California, serving clients throughout the greater Bay Area. We have experience in multifamily, commercial, waterfront, airport, and historic restoration project types. More recently, adding volumetric modular experience to that resume. Earlier this year, we launched a new division of the company, Nibby Prefab, specific with the intent and purpose of working with our clients to usher the successful use of modular construction on multifamily projects. So looking forward to sharing that experience with the group today.
Right. Thanks, Randall. That's our panelists. Now we've got a bunch of questions we're going to go through. We'll try and keep it moving and keep it sharp. But the first question I'm going to pose to Darian and to all the other panelists. But to start, can you each just briefly describe your involvement in the modular construction in modular construction and the reasoning behind it. So Darian, when we kick off with you.
Sure, sure, Curtis. I would consider myself new to modular, unlike some of the other panelists that you're going to hear from today. It was really born out of necessity that I had to learn about modular going back about a year ago. The City of Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens launched the Rapid Housing Initiative last year with a goal to create 500 additional units of permanent supportive housing for the homeless by the end of next year. So it was a very aggressive goal. And this initiative was to produce housing more quickly since the existing pipeline of permanent supportive housing in Atlanta is within traditional apartment communities that take many years to develop. So my company was lucky enough to be awarded that contract as a developer for the Rapid Housing Initiative. So considering that mandate to deliver high quality housing so quickly, I had to select a modular construction since offsite construction would allow me to build the buildings while I'm installing the infrastructure on the site, because traditional kind of sequential construction just takes long because you have to literally wait for the next step. The first project we delivered for the city of Atlanta earlier this year was a 40-unit apartment community named The Melody that was constructed from shipping containers. So my first foray into modular actually used even a more kind of, unknown and very seldom used product of shipping containers. Not only was the project successful, it broke all construction records in the city of Atlanta. We delivered the project in only 4 months. We began construction in October of 2023 and completed construction in January of 2024. And that is all inclusive, all of the infrastructure, all of the water vaults, all of the low voltage, everything that we had to construct to make this a fully permitted building. We did that in 4 months. And we wouldn't have been able to do that without modular construction. The Melody was also the first shipping container project that was multifamily in the city of Atlanta's history. So we don't have any other, I didn't have any other examples to look to for multifamily products that were shipping containers. So this was new territory for all of us, from the developer to the contractors. We were able to deliver it so quickly for mainly three reasons. One is modular construction, because it significantly truncated the construction timeline. But we also had two other reasons. It was because we were using city-owned land, so we were exempt from rezoning or variance regulations that most projects are hampered by. And we also had expedited permitting because it was a city-sponsored quasi-public project. The plan reviewers gave this project priority. So when you marry city-owned land with expedited permitting with modular construction, we literally broke records here in the Southeast for building a multifamily community in only 4 months. We intend to use modular for all of the rest of the new construction projects as part of the Rapid Housing Initiative. And our next two projects, which are underway, will both be 100 units each, and we'll be using wood frame volumetric modular as opposed to shipping containers. So it's something that I'm very new to, but also have gotten well versed very quickly. So I was somewhat thrust into this space.
Right. Yeah, so that's exciting and really, really interesting to hear, Darian. And it sounds like you're full noise into it now. Why don't we go to Andrea? Just describe your involvement in modular construction and the reasoning behind it.
Sure. I mean, I think what drove us to it was two things. One, the city of Vallejo had a site and they wanted to do permanent sort of housing. And the volumetric modular company that we use was also based there. So there was a win-win-win there in our proposal. But I think for Eden and many other affordable housing developers in California, really costs are what are driving us to explore this. I know for many of you in the rest of the country, this will be a little shocking, but it is not uncommon to see multifamily units cost upwards of $1 million each. So we really have to figure out a way to bring that cost down so that we can deliver more much needed affordable housing. So that is what kind of drove us to try this out.
Right. Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, California and many other states now, with the crisis with, fires and things like that, and insurance costs, I think, and that's driving costs up significantly across California, and we're seeing that a lot. So interesting to hear. Why don't we go, Randall? You're in California too. Why don't we go to you?
Yeah. So as a general contractor, we're involved from pre-construction all the way through the execution of the construction aspects of the project. So we work closely with the client and the design team to conduct feasibility studies to vet out, is modular the right fit for the project? Are we going to be able to get the benefits that modular brings through the project's design and development? And we work with identifying the right manufacturing partner for that, bring them on board because they're a critical part of that design development process, and continue to work with that team to get through design and permitting. And then, of course, we handle the full construction process from the procurement of the modules to the set, as well as all of the on-site improvements that go with it. We got into this out of, as Andre was saying, out of the need of reducing costs. Our first project that we did was modular construction, was affordable housing here just south of San Francisco in the city of Milpitas, with resources for community development. That project was originally intended to be a convention-built job, but out of the desire to reduce project costs, make the job pencil, the team elected to explore the idea of offsite construction. And so we went down that journey with them. But our journey into modular didn't start there. We had been done years of research into it, trying to understand the nuances of it and how it comes into, what we do as a conventional general contractor. So thankfully we were prepared for when that occasion came up, and we helped work with that team real closely to evaluate, one, does it work? We had an architect that had experience with modular construction, which was great, with David Baker's associates. And so we brought it together, and we were able to achieve that goal for the client. We were able to get the job to a place that made sense financially. And it ended up being a real successful project on all fronts, meaning we reduced costs. We reduced an 18-month schedule down to 15 and a half months. And most importantly, we managed to keep it dry through a rather wet winter season. So through that experience, we proved that it does work. And through that, we're trying to help bring that to our clients as another way of approaching projects to help reduce the increasingly high cost of construction in our market.
Right, great. And finally, Joanna, what's your involvement in modular?
I have kind of a windy road to get here. It's been interesting. I spent most of my career in real estate, but on the finance side of real estate, and candidly, always kind of being jealous of the people who were doing the developments. I was doing all the paperwork in the back, as I mentioned, we started the company about 6 years ago, but we started it from a finance perspective. We thought maybe the reason modular is only 1 or 2% of the housing market is because there's just not good financing solutions. And we were finance people. So we kind of took at it from that way and said, we're going to start financing modular developers, and we're going to help really blow this out. And after a few months of looking for developers to finance, we realized, no, that's not the problem. There just really aren't any independent developers really focused on single family modular. Multifamily is a little different, but on the single family side, which is where we wanted to focus. And we said, well, we actually, the more and more we learned, we started believing more and more. There's a famous kind of white paper that McKinsey did several years ago that said modular can be 20% cheaper and 50% faster. And we said, okay, well, even if that's halfway true, that seems like a really good business model. So let's try to do that. And so we started with our first project, and as really a true developer, we had a builder partner who was working with us. And over time, over the last several developments, what we have realized is that in order to actually begin to really achieve those benefits that modular really can do, you really need to be vertically integrated. And so we went from being finance people to being developers to now being a full-blown vertically integrated modular construction company. And so we handle everything from the transportation and set of our units to the general contracting and building of the units once they get on site. And much like Darian, we have had incredible results in terms of the speed and efficiency. We are just about to finish up a 90-unit build for rent, single family and duplex project that the vertical construction will be a year, from the first set to finishing the last CO. And that is, those are timeframes that really only builders of much larger scale would really ever be able to achieve on a production building side. So we are now proving those efficiencies, and we are all in on modular.
Awesome. Great. Great to hear. Right. We're going to just get into more of an interactive mode now. I'm just going to ask a question, and then I'm going to pose this one to Randall, and then the panelists can sort of bounce off each other. And we've got about 9 or 10 questions to go, so I want to sort of leave this to 2 or 3 minutes, per question. So let's keep it sharp and try and get as much content in as we can. So Randall, just for you to start this one off, in what ways did prefab construction reduce overall project costs for you, and and what are the hidden costs that developers should be aware of?
A great question. So in markets like San Francisco and Northern California, where labor is expensive and equally material is just as expensive, modular is really attractive for a lot of our multifamily projects, particularly when prevailing wages are involved, right? And so out of the necessity of finding other ways to go about designing and building these projects, modular becomes a very attractive option. And so along with that, it's not just that the labor is less expensive offsite, it's also the way that modular is actually executed from design all the way through. Through the efficiencies gained through design, through the benefits of working in a factory setting, controlled environment, repetition from module to module. Those efficiencies definitely start to add up, and it's both labor and material. There's a lot less material waste when you're really taking the time to thoughtfully design a project. And the factories have such little waste compared to what you see on the job site. Those combined help reduce the overall cost of the modular construction. Schedule savings is the other piece of it. Like I was mentioning earlier, for about a 102 unit project that would otherwise have been 18 months, we were able to reduce that down to about 15 and a half. Those savings result in general condition savings for the cost of construction, but also carrying cost savings for the client on the back end as well, right? Those are important to take into consideration. I would say from a hidden cost standpoint, not so much hidden, but just there's a difference in cash flow. Modular construction requires a lot more upfront effort. And with that, you're kind of bringing some of the efforts of the project team and the general contracting team earlier on during pre-construction to help make sure that you have a successful project using modular construction. So you've got increased costs there. There's also deposits that do come with the manufacturing process. Your first is usually a deposit to make your initial commitment to a manufacturer and secure your place in their manufacturing queue, because that's critical to the project and maintaining the schedule savings. The other piece is material deposits, right? So the material deposits often end up being a lump payment right about the time, either just before closing of financing or shortly thereafter, right? So you're paying a very large payment. But again, that's critical to the schedule savings, because that's allowing the manufacturer to procure materials and be manufacturing the modules concurrent with the on-site construction. The ideal scenario is that as soon as the site is ready to receive modules, the modules have been manufactured and you roll right into the setting process.
Right. Any others want to sort of kick in here and describe any hidden costs that you're aware of, or I mean, Randall covered off pretty much all the things that I would have covered, but anybody else?
Yeah. I mean, from our perspective, the cost savings really comes from just the speed of execution on the capital side. In a single family realm, you really do have all the same costs. There's economies of scale and repetition, but they're not as great as I would expect as they would be in multifamily. Some of the hidden costs, I think, are, if you're going to do this, is that a lot of the locals, you still do need a local sub base to finish out your project. You need all the MEPs, and you kind of need everyone. It's just their scope is smaller. And I think, especially if someone has never worked with those subs have not worked with modular before, there are a lot of hidden costs in the fact that they will overscope your job because they're not as clear on what the scope is and what has actually been done in the factory. And that is really an iterative process working with the factory and over time. And it's honestly one of the reasons why we became our own GC, so that we had that expertise in-house on a lot of those areas, so that we didn't have to suffer those additional hidden costs.
Right.
I think that's a great point. And the savings that you're going to have when you're mission-based are really the opportunity cost savings. When we're trying to house the homeless here in Atlanta, every day that we're not delivering is another day that someone's on the street. So there's savings outside of just capital. So those are some of the things that modular can help. But the hidden costs are going to be things that we've talked about already, the other panels have talked about, but also delivery. That is something that you have to make sure that the delivery from that plant to your site doesn't make it cost prohibitive. So that's something that can somewhat be hidden. And I want to really highlight Joanne's point about the on-site construction cost. Because those scopes are reduced, you have subcontractors that might not be willing to do your project, or, as Joanne said, overscope or overcharge you because they want to do the on-site work of doing the plumbing taps, but also do the plumbing for the building. If they're just doing the plumbing tap, you might get overcharged for that piece of the work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. All right, I'm going to move to the next question, guys, just to keep it moving. Andrea, financing these types of projects, is it similar to traditional construction, or are there differences?
Yeah, well, I'll start with a caveat that every project we do uses the low income housing tax credit. So already I'm not a traditional like financing execution. So with that in mind, I would say that yes, this is still like even extra different for us. And some of the top three things that we face is first just lender and investor comfort with the product type. And I think that's changing over time, but certainly when we went, we had lots of pre-conversations with our sort of standard partners and relationships there. And essentially, if you know much about the light tech world, all of our direct investors were kind of like, no, thank you. So we ended up going with more of the syndicators. So that impacts our pricing.
Right.
Randall already mentioned deposits, but that's a real challenge, right? Because we don't typically get all of our money until we start construction. So we had to think about how we were going to cover those deposits. And then also a thing that we came into that we had to think a lot about was insurance and bonding, right? Because we are required to provide payment and performance bonds, and many of the GCs that were associated with this volumetric modular factory didn't really want to provide those. And then also just thinking through insurance and, builders risk versus materials, et cetera. So I'd say
Okay.
those were the three main things.
Any of the other panelists want to comment on financing versus traditional construction? I think Andre covered off pretty well. Yeah. All right. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, we finance it very in the same way. It's traditional, like we have a GP LP structure for our investment projects. And I think it's really important, though, you find a lender who understands modular, because I think the cash flow is very different and the risk profile is very different. And it's not for everybody. The lender has to kind of be very openly interested in modular. Otherwise, it's not gonna work.
Okay. And look, I'm sure we can go on forever on this topic, and also, there's an insurance side as well. That is something that's really important in modular, and it does have different connotations in terms of the way you're financing as well. So yeah, there's some questions popping up in the chat, so we can go back to that. Darren, I'm going to go back to you, and what are the different materials available in the market for modular, and are there certain materials more suitable for certain projects? I mean, you've gone containerized and now you're doing stick build. Let's hear your answer on that one.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about modular is that most of the products that can be used on site can be used in a modular setting as well. So that's really the good news. And it really is about the specifics of your project to see what is the most suitable for your project. If you're considering permanent structures that conform to International Building Code or International Residential Code, volumetric modular, is probably the answer, where you can either go wood framed, steel framed, like your company does, Curtis, precast concrete modules, or shipping containers. So I kind of put it into those four categories, which all of those could be done on site. So you would have to find a manufacturer that either specializes, and many of them specialize in one of those categories. The shipping container project that I did, that manufacturer specializes in shipping container volumetric modular. Prior to that, they did steel framed, kind of cold form steel frame modular. So usually, because of the way the production lines are set up, they specialize in either wood frame, steel frame, precast, or shipping containers. You might have some that vary, but there's also panelization, which is in my thought process a form of modular. SIPs, structural insulated panels. So in studying modular, volumetric modular also looked into panelization, which can be a form of modular when you're talking about it being, coming to the site pretty much fully baked. There's also the temporary structure side. So, prior I was talking permanent structures, but a lot of modular, is called modular, is looking at kind of pods. And a lot of folks use that for kind of temporary structures. And it is somewhat a form of modular construction where you're bringing structures together, either flat packed and pretty much fully assembled or very much well assembled before you're getting it to the site. So those are things you have to consider. Are you going permanent or are you doing temporary structures? And what is kind of the use of that building to say would wood frame, steel frame, concrete, or shipping containers be more suitable?
All right. I'll open it up to the other panelists. Any other comments there? What are the different materials available? Certain materials more suitable for certain projects.
Yeah, just echoing some of Darian's comments. For those especially that are kind of beginning their journey into offsite or modular construction, is thinking about the project type itself that you're building. Looking at building codes with type 5, type 3 and type 5, at least is probably the most common type of volumetric modular we see here on the West Coast. So wood frame product, we can go upwards of 5 stories with a product like that. And then there's quite a few manufacturers that already have established factories that specialize in that. And what we're starting to see some growth and interest in type 1 modular product as well. So you're looking at a structural steel, sort of a chassis, so to speak, with like infill metal stud framing. Now you're dealing with a type 1 product. Lateral systems end up being a little different, but now you can go, mid to high rise potentially with that. So it's really getting out there and doing your homework, kind of getting to know the various manufacturers that are out there. In the case of like the shipping container, those are great for like a speed to market type of an application for both residential. We've seen commercial applications of that we've done in the past. Can be a great way because they're self-contained as a structure to some extent. But like with any building materials, you have to understand the limitations and benefits of each and figure out what's best suited for the type of project you're going to build.
All right. Yeah, good. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, we've just a quick plug for cold form steel. We're seeing a lot of growth in modular and cold form steel, and a lot of our customers are actually building hybrid sort of models. So they're using either red steel moment frame type skeletons, and then filling that out with cold form steel for the exterior cladding and internal walls, and even the floor joists and roof truss sort of areas as well. So so there's a lot of different ways, as both Randall and Darian have said, that you can use different materials, and there's no reason why you can't use a mix of materials within a project. Pods, as I think Darian also mentioned, is becoming increasingly more important. We're seeing a lot of our customers building bathroom and kitchen pods to drop into either hotels or hospitals, and that's full volumetric pods with all the MEP included. So yeah, it's really interesting to see the different applications that are occurring out in the market there.
Curtis, just wanted to hop in, and I saw a question come up in the chat. Sure. This isn't modular, but we are seeing on a deal that we were envisioning being wood, conventional stick frame in a certain market, that the cost differential on our builder's risk between wood and steel actually made sense to switch to steel frame. Yeah. So I think that's another really interesting thing. So the hard cost certainly is still not equal, but when you take into account how much the insurance is going to cost us, it actually is more cost effective to go steel.
Yeah, in some materials, obviously, and non-combustible is very important in a lot of markets now. And to your point, Andrea, the carrying costs for insurance, is lower with some materials. And also, if you're doing build to rent and things like that, your costs, your insurance costs, long-term saving is significant as well. So, yeah, it's interesting to go and look at all the different options and see where savings can be made and passed on to the customer potentially. Okay, I'm going to move on. Joanna, this one's for you. How do geographic and climate considerations impact the feasibility of modular construction?
It's really interesting timing to be asked that question. Most of our business is in Western North Carolina, in Asheville area. And if you guys have been following the news, Asheville got hit extremely hard with Helene. It's been a really, really challenging time for our company and the people there. Thank God all of us are safe, and we're moving on, and we're really hoping to be a big part of the solution and the rebuilding effort there. But it is also interesting to note that we have about 160 homes in the direct path of that incredibly destructive storm, and they held up incredibly well. We had one leak on one house that is under construction, and that is it. We had a few pieces of siding below off, also houses that are still under construction and not fully complete. So that's completely normal. So I think it is a testament to what those of us in modular always say, is that modular is built, it's built to withstand highway speeds. And so therefore it is kind of by definition very strong and very capable of withstanding things. We know factories that ship to Key West and deal, they're rated for the whatever hurricane ratings they need to be for the building down there. Everything's IRC. So from that perspective, if you can build conventional construction, probably modular is okay. It then just becomes the financial feasibility of it more than the climate. Is it, and it's really geography. What is the topography of your site? Is it conducive to modular? Can you access the site with giant trailers and cranes? How far are you from a factory? What kind of foundations are used in your market? In Texas, everything's built on a slab. We can't build modular on a slab. I know there's one or two companies that do, but that's not what we do. We have to have crawl space. So we don't really go to markets where that it's a slab construction. So there's considerations like that. But in terms of the quality of the homes and the ability of them to withstand climate, they are built to do that. And we just had an incredible test case to prove it.
Yeah. And our thoughts go out to everyone.
Yeah, it's awful.
At the moment, they're having a pretty hard time of it. And to your point, building in a controlled environment, very, very high quality sort of environments as well. I think that helps in exactly what you described.
Absolutely.
Joanna. So yeah, that's a good point. Anybody else on the panel want to throw something in here? No? Okay, I'll move on. All right, this one's for Randall. How can development, design, and construction teams collaborate more effectively on modular projects? And what unique design challenges arise in a modular construction environment compared to traditional methods?
First thing that comes to mind is early engagement. Just stressing the importance of project teams. The timeline is just a little bit of a different process than many are familiar with from a conventionally built project. And so you're really doing more design and more of the coordination efforts during design development, some of which may be deferred to later in the process, right? Whether it be deferred or delegated design exercises or even BIM modeling and VDC that might happen a little bit later. And a lot of that's critical just to support the manufacturing process. So, bringing on your manufacturer is kind of like similar to bringing on a design build contractor around. They're not an engineer of record by any means, but they will heavily influence how the project gets designed and coordinated, right? So we always push to have as much of the design team brought on board as early as possible. More importantly, bring on that manufacturer as early as you can in that design development process, because they will have critical input and insight into how the project gets designed. The concept of design for manufacturing and assembly, very familiar in the manufacturing world, a newer term and practice in the AEC industry, right? So it's kind of a little bit of a different mindset. And I think bringing the expertise of the manufacturer on board helps kind of make that transition more smoothly. And also with that is the manufacturers, they're a partner, right? They're not like a traditional subcontractor on site. They have a very big role to play, and they are very, there's risk that goes with that, of course, but they're just a very important part of the project. And I think bringing them on early is really, really important. So that would be the biggest piece of advice on that front. And then as it relates to design challenges that are unique, you're working with something that's, a very big volumetric space. We look at, traditionally built housing, the intent is to try to use every possible square inch of that site as you possibly can. You end up with a lot of different unit types, maybe some irregular unit shapes perhaps. And that's one of the limitations you have with modular construction is you're not dealing with something that's rectilinear. It's a bigger building block. It's a bit of a trade-off, but it doesn't necessarily mean that your buildings all have to look like shoe boxes either. I mean, there's design teams that have gotten very creative with using modular construction and working to create relief in the facades and make beautiful buildings out of it. It's just something you have to be aware of when you're doing the early massing and paying attention to that, because there's dimensional limitations to pay attention to get the cost savings that you want out of volumetric construction. There's minimum widths, maximum widths for shipping, ideal lengths, things like that. And again, the more experts you have at the table while you're going through the design process will help ensure you get the desired outcomes through the exercise.
All right. Thanks, Randall. Anyone else on the panel want to throw in something there? Darian.
Yeah, I definitely think that modular lends itself to a design build type of delivery. It would be very difficult to have those pieces siloed, having a design team handed off
Mhm.
to a modular team, and then have on-site contractors all working in a silo. It's almost mandated that you have to go with some type of design build, whether it's vertically integrated within the company you're hiring, or if you're, as a developer, requiring those teams to collaborate to promote that collaboration within that design build type of scenario. Some of the challenges is delineating the on-site from the off-site, and that's why design build is, I think, very necessary, because there's many pieces, including the MEP, that it's not obvious of what would be done by the factory and what would be done, in the field. So you would have to collaborate during that design process of what is the manufacturer going to be doing in a factory, what is that on-site um, builder going to be doing, and then how does that tie into what your designer is going to be putting on paper and how they're going to be delineating those tasks and scoping those out. So that's some of the challenge of making sure collaboration is at the forefront.
All right.
Yeah, I think two things that we did that really made a difference. We had a representative from RGC sit in the factory and watch the mods come off the line and correct problems as they were happening. Because the last thing you want to do is let the unit get replicated and the error multiple times. And then the other thing would be to just put into your budget to pay subs early to submit submittals, so you can work through some of those design issues and challenges.
Great. Yeah, I think, and just a comment from me, we talked about development, design, and construction, and I think supply chain plays a really important part here as well. It's been able to collaborate very early on with your supply chain, making sure you've got all of that, different subs, trades, and obviously material suppliers sorted out really early in the process. That really helps. It goes without saying in a modular environment, especially offsite, but it's another very important consideration, and also helps with savings in the construction. So, all right, Joanna, how important is standardization in modular? I think we Randall sort of hinted on it a little bit. And
Sorry.
What efforts are being made to standardize the permitting process, and what effort is being made with building units? So, a few questions there, but standardization.
This was a good lead in. I think, I think Andrea hit on something interesting, which is kind of having someone at the factory to look at. You don't want to replicate the challenges. So standardization is amazing, and the factory is very capable of doing that and replicating. But a little bit of that prior question of really planning in advance and making sure you are building exactly what you want to do. A lot of the dynamism that happens on a stick built site, right, where you're like, oh wait, that's not looking great, and you can kind of restructure things on the fly and figure things out and improve it. You can't do that with modular. When the plans are set, and to go to the approvals and the permitting, when the plans are set at the factory, they are then sent to a third-party authorizing body that signs off on the plans, and it is the equivalent of having a building permit in your local jurisdiction. So the factory is then able to go and produce the plan as drawn. And throughout the process, there are interim inspections, as it would be as if it was being built on site. So when that unit leaves the factory, it has every single inspection that it should have had that's behind the walls. And so in practice, what is supposed to happen is you bring it to your site, you've got your foundations. Those are inspected locally, of course, those are built locally. And then there are some of the finish inspections that are supposed to happen on site for the MEPs and for, final building. And they are supposed to accept the permits and the approvals from the factory. That normally does happen. But as you know, buildings are local, bureaucracies are local. Some municipalities make up their own rules. Some of them like to make things more difficult. Some work with you very well. So it's really different every time in terms of dealing with the permitting. But typically, it is a very smooth process in the sense that it's approved at the factory, it comes to your site, you do the local inspections that are required, and everything goes through. In terms of kind of standardizing the designs, that's obviously helps locally as well, because we just finished, I mentioned, this 90 unit project, and we only had 3 different building designs in the 90 units. And so once the factory is good at building it, they build it faster. And once the inspectors are comfortable with the specific structure of each unit type, that also becomes a lot easier in terms of finishing out the
Right.
Approvals.
Yeah. Darren,
Yes.
Darren, how did you find permitting and the process in Atlanta for your project?
It was actually pretty interesting. So some of the shipping containers that we had were donated from our state emergency agency. So the state of Georgia donated to the city of Atlanta shipping containers that were used as hospital rooms during COVID. When they decommissioned those hospitals, they wanted to get rid of that state inventory. So city of Atlanta raised their hand, not knowing that it would ultimately be used for residential. Around the same time, unrelated, I was hired as the Rapid Housing Initiative developer. So my first project, they said, you're going to use shipping containers, these ones we just got. So I got thrust into that. So I actually reached out to the manufacturer of those hospital shipping containers and said, would you build and retrofit and build some new ones for me for these residential ones? So I used actually the same manufacturer that had worked for the state of Georgia to do hospital shipping container construction. So it really is about researching and learning the players out there. And in this case, because I was doing adaptive reuse plus new construction using shipping containers, I wanted to use the same manufacturer.
Okay. California, Randall, you guys are in the thick of it over there with regulations and inspections. So what's your experience?
Well, the inspections part of it and plan check, pretty streamlined. And California has their factory built housing program. So it's an established program whereby the state actually has jurisdiction over the plan check and inspections of offsite construction, right? So it's been around for several years. Probably a good example, I think, throughout the US in terms of how to facilitate the use of offsite construction, sets clear lines of delineation between the AHJ and then the state. And then the state actually has approved, authorized third-party private agencies that conduct those plan check and inspections. So it's much more streamlined. I think getting through the state inspection process is much quicker than getting through the local municipality. There's a lot less kind of red tape to have to go through. So I think it's a good process. I think it's worked well. I think the greater challenges are just getting through some of the other policy requirements that any project gets through to be developed new housing in California. On the topic of standardization, I think that's a real important mindset, a mind shift, so to speak, that the industry, I think, will need to come to adopt to further promote the expanded use of offsite construction. Because again, offsite construction is manufacturing, right? The idea is to reproduce something many, many times over. And with that, you only get better at doing it and you increase the efficiencies at which you do it. Most projects now we go about doing them, they're all custom homes, right? They're unique design. They're not the same as the one before it. And while it does work now, we're missing out. Yeah, I think we're not yet achieving the full benefits I think we'll eventually be able to get to with manufactured or factory built housing by working towards developing either as manufacturers developing their own standard unit types that clients can pick, or we actually have some affordable housing clients here in the Bay Area that are working with design teams to develop their own standard units that then they can use and replicate from project to project. And I think those that are starting to work in that space ahead of their peers will start to get the gains out of that ahead of the rest of the market. And it's really exciting what you can get out of that. So it's something that I think those that haven't explored that yet should definitely get into the conversation and help support that movement.
All right, thanks. Good. Well, I mean, we all know that, I mean, modular construction is not easy, and we've seen, some pretty colossal failures in the industry. We're not going to talk about those specifically, but Andre, I'm just going to ask you, what disadvantages do you see when comparing prefab or modular construction with traditional construction methods?
Yeah, I think ours is still unique to our financing structure. I mean, I think a lot of the benefits that come from modular are really about risk reward balance. And, in the affordable housing industry, our reward is always kept, right? The government is giving us a bunch of money. And so they also sort of are dictating how much developer fee we can take. And so I think we're always thinking about, like, is this risk reward calculation in our favor. And then it's hard. We have all these deadlines. And then I think also the thing that I would love to see is a little bit more standardization, especially in the volumetric side on like how things connect across different factories. So I sometimes call this the VHS and Betamax problem, but that's a little dated. So I'm going to now call it the Tesla versus every other electric car like connection thing. If we could all decide on one like way, an EV connects to a supercharger, or one way that like volumetric modulars connect, then that lets me as a developer have a lot more confidence to pay $1 million essentially to get my construction drawings ready. Because then if the factory A that I wanted to use goes out of business, because we're seeing that unfortunately still, I can switch to factory B and still be able to like find somebody to build something for me. And I think that's still the beauty of stick build, right? I can still go to lots of different great GCs if my favorite one goes out of business. So
I'll
Yeah,
throw
I
it.
would echo those. The disadvantages I see, some we've already discussed, the upfront deposits, so that way the capital structure works, the limited number of modular manufacturers, which leads to limited capacity, which indirectly brings cost up if you don't have that level of competition. What Andrea just mentioned, the reliance on that modular manufacturer to remain solvent of those that actually exist, they have to remain solvent because they're relying on the inflow of work. If they're not vertically integrated like Joanna's company, they're reliant on work. So if they can't remain solvent through projects that are not related to yours, you might run into problems with your manufacturer. And then just the lack of knowledge from subcontractors, financiers, local governments about the product that can be a disadvantage in terms of timing, in terms of permitting, and just overall speed.
Right. Randall, any other comments there?
I'd say just echoing some of what Andrea mentioned, the financing is probably the biggest challenges we see. It's kind of like a chicken and egg type of scenario where you need to get your manufacturer on board early to support the development, and ideally, as you can't project or know with certainty what your construction schedule is going to be until your financing stack is completed. But there's also that need to make sure that you get your place in line with that manufacturer to support your schedule so that you don't miss out on the opportunity for the schedule gains that you're going to get, right? So that's a struggle, I think, on almost every single project. It's a little bit of a dance. It's always a little bit of a waiting game to wait to get confident in your financing approvals and then pull the trigger with the manufacturer. Hopefully everything goes as planned. But if it starts to kind of waver and things get delayed in the financing process, it's not great for the factories because they potentially have a gap in their production line, which could result in 2 to 3 months of a gap if they can't pull another project forward. So it doesn't help the industry, but it's also it's challenging for everybody, right? We navigate that through, I think, any project where modular construction is being used, and I don't know, hopefully through some type of fiscal policy or something, they'll find a better way to help support projects using offsite construction in that manner. But I think I see that as one of the biggest challenges that all of our projects go through.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
interesting because I think that's one of it's a disadvantage, but it's also when you overcome it, it becomes the biggest advantage, right? Because the fact that modular is you're doing things in parallel instead of linear, right? So linear is easier, right? Because you do things step by step by step. There's an established process of what you do when and who gets paid when. Modular, it's kind of like everything, in order to achieve that time advantage, everything is happening in parallel. And so, like Randall just said, I mean, the financing, it all, when we do our deals, it's like, you're signing the contract with the factory and with your debt and with your equity all on the same day. So because it's all coming together, right? So I mean that is a big lift all up front, but then you're kind of set, and then you just kind of implement.
Yeah, really good comments. Good. Right, we're going to go to our final question, and I'm going to pose this to each of you, but I'll start with Darian first. If you had to give one piece of advice to a developer just starting out with prefab construction, what would that be?
Well, it would probably be one piece of advice that has many sub pieces that all focus around doing your research and engaging with as many developers as you can in your area and even outside of your area, because your area might not have a bunch of developers that use modular. So doing a bunch of research and then really getting to know the manufacturers. They are a partner, and Randall mentioned that they are truly a partner of yours. They're not going to be similar to an on-site subcontractor, which you might only use once and not really know their background. But since they have a standardized skill, you know that they might be okay just because they had a low price. You really need to learn those manufacturers, go visit their sites. I've traveled all over the country visiting modular manufacturers in these rural parts of America, seeing their process, seeing what levels of sophistication and staffing they have, and just making sure your financial partners are comfortable with that process. This is still, even though the technology is old, has been used since World War II, it's still not very widely used. I heard the stat of only 1% of housing production is using it. So it's a very underutilized method of delivery. So really getting everybody up to speed with that's on your team, and just identifying local contractors that are experienced with modular construction, because that's going to be very, very important to have that on-site delivery.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks. On Andrea, I'll let you go next.
Well, he hit a lot of it, but I think I would say for us, we picked a team of people we had already all worked with, from financing through GC, and an architect, and really the only new component was the factory. And so I think that really helped us because we like knew everyone else, and we really worked together to like insert this new element. And then I think other advice would just be, it's completely different than all of our other processes. So like just set that aside and really understand how it all comes together. And it's going to take more legwork on the project management side, certainly.
Right. Okay. Randall.
I would agree 100% with the feedback both Darren and Andrea gave. I mean, what we found when we were doing our homework and our research going in this before we did our first job is that there's a whole community of people in the industry out there that are willing to share their experience. No one's holding this close to their chest thinking it's a competitive advantage. We all have this shared challenge of trying to get more housing built in an economical manner, right? And this is one of the methods that is helping to do it where it best fits. But yeah, people are really willing, they're sharing their time, sharing their experiences, their lessons learned, and just get out there and tap into that. Don't be afraid. If you don't do your homework, that's when you end up in the news. Or you have an unsuccessful project, which no one wants, right? Just, get out there, whether it's a manufacturer, it's fellow, your colleagues in the industry, just poke around, get to understand it really well. Like anything else, it does have risk, but you manage that by bringing knowledge to the table and knowing what that is and how to navigate through it. And which you can't stress the importance enough of doing your homework.
Yep, great. Thanks, Randall. And Jonah, finally, I'll let you close with some comments.
Everyone summed it up perfectly well. I agree with all of those sentiments. I guess I would just kind of maybe wrap it in a bow and say, if you do decide to go forward and you're doing your budgets, and for some reason your budget is showing that you're saving 30%, go back and do your budget again, because modular isn't a silver bullet. It is a very productive, useful, and efficient way to construct housing, but it is not a silver bullet, and it isn't, I can't speak on the multifamily side, but on the single family side, overall, the costs are pretty similar. You're saving money because it's faster. You can compete with bigger guys and maybe get your costs down to them as a smaller provider like we are currently achieving, but it is not a silver bullet. Do not believe those numbers. You're missing something if that's what you're showing. So, but I would also just recommend diving in, because it should be more than 1% of the housing stock. It really is a good solution.
Yeah, thanks. Look, and I think to everyone's points, right, it's, this is a growing industry. I think our company is seeing more and more customers building modular. Offsite manufacturing is the way to go in the future, for a whole bunch of reasons, speed of construction, quality, use of lower skilled labor, not necessarily all trades are going to be eliminated, but that's one area where you can skill up more people in the local area. As people get more used to modular, I think that's going to really take off. So it's an exciting time. We're in a perfect storm with all these climate conditions and things going on, and I think that really bodes well for the industry in the future as well. So look, I think the panelists, we've got some questions which we can go through. Dane, how do you want to handle this? Do you want me to go through the questions now, or?
Yeah, of course, we have time for a couple questions. We can just go through the Q&A and we'll wrap up at 1.
Yeah, sure. So this one is from Rush Lincoln. How do you ensure that the modules are not damaged when set? Sorry, had experience with a project that was severely damaged from water infiltration due to severe weather and lack of adequate protect. Mold and water damage significantly added to the costs and time. So I'll throw that open to the panelists.
I'll take that one just from the first-hand experience with that. The manufacturers we've come to know out of the factory, the modules have a protection on them. They're shrink wrapped out of the factory to protect them during transit and storage. When we get to the site, that's then removed, but they then have a layer of like a single ply roof membrane, like an EPDM or PVC laying over the top of that. That stays on. So as we're doing the set sequence, we're using that to lap with the adjacent module. So horizontally, we're maintaining a temporary barrier, so to speak, during the set sequence. And then any exterior wall of the module that's now exposed that has the WRB or the part of the building skin is already pre-installed out of the factory. So again, that gives you some layer of protection. So we kind of follow that cycle as we go through the erection process, right? And of course, we are watching the weather, right? If we're going to experience rain, we may not take risks that day or work a partial day to mitigate that. I think one of the greater risks comes in once the modules are all set now and you're starting to do your now permanent roof construction. And I'm speaking in the context of multifamily, of course. So when you get to the roof, you've got weeks worth of work to do up there where you're making new penetrations to the roof, you're creating conditions that could trap water, you're exposing your building. So the process now for most is to watch the weather and try to set your modules in the drier months, but inevitably projects just based on funding cycles end up getting built and set in the winter months. And so our particular job, we actually end up having to tent the building. It was very expensive to do, but it worked. We did a system that spanned over our scaffolding that was still erected and did a shrink wrap system over the top of that. Our building geometry helping to allow for that. It may not always work in every case, but it is really important to work with your GC to make sure they have a plan and a contingency plan of how they're going to mitigate weather during the set process. The industry's working to find better ways to do that. I know we're researching some different products with our roofing manufacturers to find a system that's a little more trustworthy that we can do as like a temp to perm solution. But it's still in its infancy, but definitely challenge anybody in the market on the building side of the set crew side to be thinking of ways to better mitigate that risk, because it is one of the challenges that we all face.
Right. I'll throw it open just for final comments. We're sort of running short of time, but any other panelists want to comment? Good. Okay. So we're nearly at time. So Dane, I'll throw it back to you. We've got a whole bunch of other questions that we didn't get time to answer, but I'm sure we can answer those offline.
Yes, definitely. Unfortunately, we have come to time. It feels like it went just like that. But thank you guys for such an amazing discussion. I want to thank all of you for tuning in, our audience, as well as the panelists, and for Curtis for leading the discussion. I hope you all have a great day. And just as a reminder, if you missed anything, you will be receiving an email with the recording link. But otherwise, appreciate everyone for coming out.
Right.
Thank you.
You guys stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Hallelujah. Girls hit you, hallelujah. Girls hit you.